The iPhone 8 would release in late 2017 alongside the larger 8 Plus right before the iPhone 10 came out, which would be Apple's first foray into a home buttonless world. These phones served as an essential stepping stone between the old and the new, being great options with the same internal specs as the iPhone 10, just in that all so familiar design. And to answer how the iPhone 8 holds up immediately, it's still a solid phone, running iOS 16, and while it's not the fastest, it's still capable of doing basically anything you would want to do, or would even be able to do on, say, the most expensive and newest iPhone 14 Pro. Ultimately, both phones are running iOS 16, and so the core software experience really isn't that different. Time will tell how many more updates the iPhone 8 will get, but it's guaranteed to keep receiving them at least until the fall of 2023, and there's a pretty good chance it goes further. The main issue users will find with a phone both this small and this old will be in battery life, which even when in good health isn't going to be great. But otherwise, the iPhone 8 manages to be a more than capable device over 5 years later, and that won't be changing anytime soon. Hey, how's it going? I'm Josh from 91 Tech, and we're going to do this review a little bit differently than usual. Typically, in the past, I've always looked at the iPhone 8 and 8 Plus together in one video, but that's not going to be the case for this one. We're going to purely focus on the iPhone 8, and we'll do a later review of the iPhone 8 Plus, which will be linked in the description once it's up. Timestamps are also down there if you want to skip ahead. But the reason we're doing this is that now more than ever, the previously small differences between the two phones have become significantly more substantial. So in this video, we again ask the question, how exactly does the iPhone 8 hold up 5 years later, and could it even still be worth buying? Could it be worth buying? No, not really, unless you're on a super tight budget and need an iPhone that runs iOS 16 and don't care about anything else. Battery life, especially when buying used, is likely to be pretty painful. But if you're fine with keeping a charger nearby, the phone is still able to perform tasks just about as well as any other smartphone nowadays. And hey, the iPhone 8 is very cheap. Turning to eBay.com, it can be found for not much over $100, occasionally even less. Something like, say, $120 for a phone that's able to run iOS 16. That's always going to be worth it, but that doesn't mean it's the right choice for you. I obviously don't recommend the smaller iPhone 8, or really the 8 Plus for that matter, for a couple main reasons. There's the general potential issues with buying used or refurbished, and you never really know what you're getting for sure, and that in conjunction with the iPhone 8 having been around for over a half decade now, it makes for a lot of risk. But beyond just that, there are significantly better iPhones in the exact same design for not much more money. In particular, I would point you to the 2020 second generation iPhone SE, which can be found for around $150 USD and has a newer processor, meaning longer supports and smoother speeds. I did recently do a video on why that phone is such good value, so link to that along with my current iPhone buying guides will be in the description if you're interested. That being said, odds are most of you aren't really looking at buying the iPhone 8. Maybe you're curious on how it holds up as an owner of the device yourself, or any other plethora of reasons. So let's back up here and start with what makes this iPhone so different from its bigger brother in the 8 Plus, and why I'm reviewing them as standalone devices. For starters, the iPhone 8 is the absolute oldest and lowest tier iPhone currently being supported on iOS 16. While the 8 Plus and the iPhone 10 do have the same CPU in the A11 chipset, they also have 3 GB of RAM rather than the 2 gigs in the iPhone 8. It's not going to make or break how fast the phones perform, but it becomes more and more relevant as these devices age further. As for other differences, of course the 8 Plus is significantly larger and has a much bigger battery, and naturally the second camera lens on the back. But the main reason I'm splitting up the reviews is that the iPhone 8 has a direct successor, whereas the 8 Plus does not. The iPhone 8 was followed up by the iPhone SE, then the iPhone SE, both of which were successors to the iPhone SE. In less confusing terms, the 2016 iPhone SE, 2017 iPhone 8, 2020 2nd Gen SE, 2022 3rd Gen SE, which Apple is currently still selling for what is frankly too much money, $430 US. The SE 2 and 3 have the same body of the iPhone 8 with upgraded processors, making them the obvious choice if you have previously liked this smaller home button design and want to upgrade to something similar but faster. The iPhone 8 Plus, on the other hand, is the last of its kind. There was never another plus-sized home button iPhone, with the closest to it being the iPhone XR and 11, but even they of course have that newer design. And that's really why we're talking about these phones in separate videos. Ah yes, the design, both the best and worst age thing about this phone. Why could it be the best? Well, I mean the iPhone SE2 and SE3. Pretty self-explanatory iPhone 8. It is the exact same design, and there's a reason for it. It's a solid one, it's reliable, and makes for a nice compact form factor for those who appreciate that. You have the 4.7-inch Retina display. It looks good. The iPhone 8 does have True Tone, which is nice, and then of course there's Touch ID with the classic capacitive home button. It's extremely fast and consistent, and arguably just as good as Face ID, but the reason we don't have it anymore is because we don't have the home button, and that's where the worst aged part of the phone comes in, the design. It was the same design we've seen since 2014 with the iPhone 6, at least from the front. Just to prove a point here, this iPhone 8 Plus here isn't an 8 Plus, it's a 7 Plus. I just put an iOS 16 wallpaper on it to make it look like it was an 8 Plus. Did I do it out of laziness because this phone was already charged? Maybe, but it also does prove a point. This could have been a 6 Plus, and I bet a lot of people wouldn't notice. That being said, it does look quite a bit different from the back. This iPhone did bring glass and wireless charging, which was really nice and kind of made it feel a lot more premium, to the point that this design now from the back at least is actually still pretty much being used with the iPhone 13 and 14. Aluminum frame, glass back, pretty straightforward. It looks nice and it feels nice. The iPhone 8 also has water resistance, just like the iPhone 7 did, and fast charging. But we have been seeing this general design for over 8 years now. Now in fairness, it's a 5-year-old phone. The iPhone SE3 looks exactly the same and came out 4.5 years later. So that's really why it's both the best and worst age aspect of the device. Does the 14 Pro look different? Absolutely, but you can still buy a phone that looks identical. So it just goes to show how much people do enjoy this design. If it gets the job done, that's what's important, and that's totally fair. Well, so 3D Touch is on the iPhone 8 that isn't on the SE2 and 3, unfortunately. I've talked about 3D Touch lots of times, we won't go into it, and visually it doesn't make a difference. So solid device, and that's why we saw 2 more iterations of it with the SE2 and 3. The design is the same, but the entire purpose of those newer phones was for the internals. Specifically, we have the A11 Bionic chipset and 2 GB of RAM. This will be noticeably slower from the SE2 and the SE3, but very similar to the 8 Plus and the iPhone 10, which have the same chipset but 3 GB of RAM. And ultimately, what matters is how is the experience. So iOS 16, as of now, the latest and greatest software for iPhone. As stated, the iPhone 8 is the lowest tier device to be running it, as the first iPhone SE, 6S, and 6S Plus, and then even the 7 and 7 Plus, all were left behind on iOS 15. The 7 and 7 Plus were phones I had been expecting to get another year, but them no longer being supported does now raise a lot of questions for the future of the iPhone 8, along with the 8 Plus and the 10. Do these phones get iOS 17 the fall of 2023? For now, they're supported and perform pretty well, but will that be the case a year from today? Of course, losing iOS support isn't the end of the line, with the vast majority of apps tending to still be fully downloadable for a couple years onwards. Even then, you can usually download the latest compatible versions if you've used the app before, but that's still not a scenario most of us want to be in, as losing out on new features is never fun, and for better or for worse, not getting new updates gives a pretty clear indication your phone could use an upgrade. Speculation aside, the iPhone 8 as of today runs surprisingly smoothly on iOS 16. Basic tasks and running most apps are handled like a breeze, and in my time with the phone I found slowdowns in lag to be a rarity. It does happen occasionally, especially when you first boot up the phone. Some stutters here and there aren't uncommon, but in fairness, the phone is over 5 years old, and it running as strongly as it does is an absolute miracle. This will vary depending on your own device, how much it's been used, if it has any issues such as poor battery life, that can make an impact, and that is going to be the most likely pain of having a phone this old. Battery life. The device had a small battery to begin with, and over the years, smartphone batteries do degrade in how much charge they can hold. If you go to settings, battery health, that percentage right there should tell you how much of the original capacity remains, and you should be okay until your phone is about around or below 80%. Okay as in it shouldn't be unusable. If it is at a certain level that is impacting your performance, there should be a note saying that you need to get your battery serviced, something the Apple Store will do for $50, wherein they just replace the battery altogether with a new one. This process can really breathe life into an old device, along with a restore if you make sure to back up all your data first, but this is still a small phone running pretty powerful software, so whether or not your battery is healthy, you're probably not getting too many hours of screen on time before you'll need to reach for a charger. Aside from that, there's not too much separating the iPhone 8 from any other newer iPhone, maybe without some of the luxuries and features in newer iPhones, but an iPhone 8 is, as said before, still practically as capable as an iPhone 14 Pro at the end of the day. And that's the thing with these old iPhones at this point, they're just practical, they work, they get the job done. Pretty much anything my current phone can do, this old iPhone 8 can do, and that's where Apple really shines when it comes to the longevity of their devices. Yes, an Android from 5 years ago can still be very much usable today, particularly if you go to the trouble of getting a custom ROM on there. But that's the thing, you have to go to the trouble of doing something like that, finding workarounds. That isn't the case when it comes to Apple. This is just fully up to date. It performs fairly smoothly. One notable feature lacking here is the ability to take portrait mode photos. I believe this is the only supported iPhone right now that can't do it, with the single lens iPhone SE2 and 3 being able to take portrait photos thanks to some software magic and their newer, more powerful chipsets. Even so, I actually think the iPhone 8 has a pretty fine camera, good enough to take photos for most, and in well-lit situations you can capture some really beautiful shots. If you're using this phone and do want a truly great upgrade to the camera, something like the iPhone 13 or even all the way up to the 14 Pro is definitely the way to go. But we might as well take a couple minutes to go more in depth on the camera here. On the back we have a single 12 megapixel sensor that can record video at up to 4K at 60 frames per second. This was the first time it could do 4K 60, so that was impressive. Then on the front of the phone we have a 7 megapixel sensor that can film 1080p at 30 frames per second. And again, same sensor you find in the SE2 and the SE3, definitely not the best, but it is just a selfie camera, so I'm not too concerned about that. It's the main camera on the back that I really want to show off here, especially compared to the iPhone SE2/3. While the iPhone 8 does provide the same general quality photos that you would get on the iPhone 10 or the 8 Plus, just minus 2x zoom and portrait mode, it actually is lacking compared to the newer SEs, even with the same sensor, and that's because Apple's image processing and their newer chipsets just keeps getting better. So even though these were taken with the same actual camera, the tech inside the iPhone SE3 allows it to just do more. It's impressive. It's not drastically better, but it's impressive. Now, low light photos is going to be pretty bad across the board. Doesn't matter which one of these that you use, it's not going to be good, though of course the newer ones are a bit better than the iPhone 8 is. None of them have night mode though, which is a huge oversight on Apple's part. They've had night mode since the 2019 iPhone 11, and yet they don't even have it in the 2022 iPhone SE3. It's weird, but unfortunately the iPhone 8 doesn't have it either. For general photo taking though, it can do a really good job, but particularly in good lighting conditions. Outdoors, of course, it's going to look the best with all that natural lighting. It can take a good shot with good HDR, nice coloring, sharp. I mean, I used my iPhone 10 back in the day, and I have a lot of pictures I still really like from it, including a couple I still use as a wallpaper here and there. Keep in mind the 10 has the same camera as the iPhone 8, so that just speaks to how good these cameras are starting to hold up now, just because they've been so good for so long. It's not nearly as fancy or impressive as the 14 Pro camera, but when it comes to just taking a photo, I mean, yeah, the 14 Pro's camera here is better, but it's still a photo of the same thing. You can tell what's happening in both pictures. Compared to what the newest iPhones can do, it's definitely lacking, but it's held up enough that if I had to use this as my main camera, I wouldn't be crying about it. And when it comes down to any aspect, the design, the camera, the specs, the software, it all just holds up. I might not recommend buying one, but if you have one right now and it's working for you, I don't think there's any rush to upgrade. Definitely do so if you want to. The iPhone 13 or something would be a huge difference, but if you're happy, then stick with it. You might as well. This might be the lowest tier iPhone, at least of phones being supported on iOS 16, but it doesn't feel right to call it that, even if it is true. This is still a solid smartphone, and really, I think at the end of the day, that's about all you can ask for. So with that, I think we're right about done here. If you're using an iPhone 8 right now, maybe comment down below. Definitely want to hear from you. Again, battery life I think is going to be the roughest thing for people, and that can affect performance as well. If your phone's pretty close to the max for storage, that can be an issue. I've also seen phones that are just slow for seemingly no reason. They have decent batteries, but everything just doesn't feel right. Sometimes the software reset will help, but sometimes I think the phone is just old and it's been used a lot over the years and it's really feeling it. It's not going to be a great experience for everyone, but I do think for the most part, most people using the iPhone 8 nowadays, they're probably doing all right. So maybe go ahead and confirm or deny that for me in the comments, as well as those of you who have upgraded from the iPhone 8. What did you upgrade to? How's that going for you? If you found this video helpful or interesting, maybe hit that like button and consider subscribing for more content just like this. Again, full iPhone buying guides linked in the description. And with all that being said, thank you so much for watching. I'm Josh from 91 Tech, and I will see you all next time.